Hello, my name is Robert Goodwin, and this is Law on the Line. I would like to welcome my guest today, and that is Jason Scott Camillo, who's a solo practitioner in the field of immigration law with an office at 409 Joyce Kilmer Avenue in New Brunswick. And Jason has been practicing immigration law for now 20 plus years.
Yes.
Which is probably hard to believe. Anyway, Jason, welcome to Law on the Line.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I know we only have about 29 minutes, and this is a topic that we could spend at least 29 hours on, especially in the current environment where we find ourselves. Yes. So the first question I want to lead in with, as an immigration lawyer, what's it like to be an immigration lawyer post January 21st, 2025?
Not fun is the best way. Not fun and challenging. Before January 21st, when the election results came out, November 6th or 7th, whatever it was, everything immediately went haywire. And since then I've been working till midnight most nights, frankly, including on the weekends, just trying to get everything done and filed and protect as many people as I can and make sure everyone's taken care of, frankly.
Your practice is devoted toward what area? Corporate? Individuals? Explain what you do. And
people. I don't do any of the business end of things. I do all of the asylum cases. I do a lot of asylum cases. A lot of detention cases, especially right now, and a lot of family petitions and those kinds of things, and victim-based forms of relief, like if you're a victim of a crime or something like that. That's mostly what I do. So me and my staff. So it's very challenging, and everyone is understandably afraid, and frankly, for the most part, with reason. I'm not going to tell them not to. But that's kind of what it's like.
So, Jason, we talked earlier in preparation that, as an immigration lawyer, you're dealing with people who've come from another part of the world. And some people come with documents and some people don't. And you also indicated to me that between undocumented people and documented, there's this vast gray area. Explain what you mean by that, and also that the term illegal is really not, when people hear that all the time, it's not really a defined concept in the law.
Yes. So there's no definition in the law of undocumented or documented. It's not terminology we use as immigration practitioners. That's very much how people talk about it, not as lawyers. Essentially, there are a huge range of statuses that all have conflicting and sometimes competing benefit rights or not rights in terms of where you are. So there are people who come at the border, get given a order of removal by ICE at the border, and then ICE allows to come here anyway, and they get a work card. And then you can also come to the border, apply for asylum, be allowed to apply for asylum, but then you have to wait 6 months or 8 months to get a work card. And then there's
Where do you wait at that point?
Wherever your family is or whoever is going to receive you, frankly.
Within the United States. Okay, go ahead.
Within the United States. So, but there's people who have work cards, and some of those work cards have statuses attached to them, and some don't really have statuses attached to them. Some are permanent statuses, some of them are residents, some of them aren't residents, some of them, the range is in the dozens and doesn't really make sense because this truly is every administration piling on what they want to do, and someone does this and then another one does this and someone tries to take this away. And you end up with a system, which is what we have, which is very, very broken and also doesn't make sense. I have trials today in 2029 for cases that started in 2017.
2029? You meant
2029. 2029, 4 or 5 years from now. And for cases that started in the 20 teens, I was talking to a woman today who, she came in 2019. Her first hearing date is in 2027 with the judge, with the immigration court, and that's her initial date. I expect her trial date to be sometime in the 2030s.
So explain to me, what is that, let's use that person as an example. What is that person's status here in this country now? In other words, is that somebody that we hear the administration is saying you're illegal, get out, and we're going to pick you up and send you to some detention camp, or do you have legal rights to be here?
I mean, both of those things, frankly. They would like to get rid of everyone, is what they've said, and I think they actually mean that, which is part of the problem. Her specifically, she's been before the judge the entire time. She's been waiting for a date. Lots of people, everyone's hearings basically got continued because of COVID for 2 or 3 years. Like, no one had hearings for a good year, and that messed up the schedule at the immigration courts. But she's been in proceedings the whole time. She has a pending application for asylum. She has a work card, has had a work card for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years since I've retained her, since she's been my client, and will until her case is over. But she's an asylum seeker and has the right to work, has the right to live here while her case is being processed. It's still difficult to try and win an asylum case in 2032, explaining why you're still in danger from 2017. Like, the length of time doesn't generally help people because it just takes so long. And it is good job security, I will give it that at least, because they still need a lawyer. But I don't like cases that take forever.
15 years.
I have lots of cases that take 10 years, 12 years. That's a very normal time frame for a trial date with the immigration court.
So what is the status of an asylum seeker, for example? What is that status?
It is lawful to apply for asylum at the border. It is lawful to apply for asylum inside the United States. There's no definition of statuses. It's a temporary status, but really it would be attached to, do you have a work authorization? That's what most people would attach it to. If you're an asylum seeker, for the most part, once it's been pending for more than 6 months, you can get a work card, and then that extends throughout your case. So you just have to renew it. And they charge you for it. It's like $470. It's $500 to get a work card.
Not every year.
It used to be every year. Then it was every 2 years. Right now it's every 5 years. I'm guessing Trump will change it back to what it was when he was here last time, which was 2 years. But it's expensive. And I have families where it's a family of 4. And I don't charge to do kids' work cards because I don't really care. I don't think it's fair. But if I have a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old, the parents are paying $500 a pop to renew their work cards. And for like health insurance purposes, they should have a valid Social Security number, which is attached in some part to their work card and work authorization. So you're spending that money to get a work card for a kid who definitely isn't working. A 4-year-old isn't going to work. But they still need to have a Social Security card that's valid so they can pay their taxes and put them on their taxes. The whole thing doesn't make
a work
any
card
sense.
for a minor. That's over
because that's how you get your Social Security card.
I see.
So you get it initially when you get your first work card, but then you also have to renew. You don't renew the Social Security exactly, but you renew the work authorization, and that lets you use the Social Security card when you file your taxes. If that makes sense.
So what distinguishes an asylum seeker from a person who comes into this country undocumented? Why isn't that person seeking asylum, or what prevents that person from seeking asylum?
Many things happen that don't let people apply for things that they could. I'll give you an example. Last night, most of my detained consults I do at night just because it's easier and I'm actually at home and I can do it without having my schedule for the work during the day. But I talked to his wife because he's in detention. He came the first time in 2018. He got deported at the border once, got sent back to Honduras, came back a second time, got sent back to Honduras, came back a second time a couple months later because he was afraid of getting killed.
Can I ask you a question with regard to this person? Why couldn't he get across the border the first time? He got caught? What?
He got caught.
Oh.
He got caught. He was in detention and had an interview. I don't know what happened because I haven't done his case, but it got denied. He got deported. He came back a second time, got deported. Came back a third time, didn't get caught, and has been here ever since. And I asked the wife, I'm like, okay, well, why didn't he apply for asylum the first time? Like, what, at this point for me to do something, I'd have to have a very good case to make it worthwhile to try and do something for this man. And she basically explained that he had witnessed a murder by a gang in their town, and then he went to the police, tried to get help from the police, filed a complaint with the police, and then they tried to kill him again. So he came here in 2018. And then after he came in 2019, the gang actually went and killed his brother at his house that he had lived in with the brother. So it's frankly a good asylum case, but because he already has an order, he doesn't qualify for asylum anymore. I can't do that because he came back illegally after he was deported. And essentially there's not really any good relief for him. He would qualify for something called withholding of removal, but that's
What is it called?
It's called withholding of removal. It's one of the lowest forms of temporary protection you can get. But what was explained to the wife last night was that one of the things that Trump is doing right now is that withholding of removal, we say, okay.
Say that again. What is it called?
Withholding of removal.
Withholding of
I'm sorry.
removal. Okay.
Withholding of removal. But withholding, when you get withholding, we promise that we won't deport you to your country. And that's it. And until Trump, if I want withholding from Honduras, you get to stay here, you get your work card. It's only a work card. You never become a resident with it. You renew your work card essentially, and that renews your status. But those people were fine. And I have a bunch of withholding cases that I've won over the years, and they just renew the work cards.
How long can somebody stay with the work card here in this country prior
Until
to...
they die,
Okay.
honestly.
All right.
Depending on what kind of card it is, you can keep that status indefinitely, essentially, unless you can move up or down. But for him, he can't ever do anything else because I can't win his case at this point, and that's very sad.
And what's going to happen to this individual?
He's in detention. I mean, if they don't do anything, he'll get deported within a couple weeks and get sent back to Honduras, and at that point, I don't know, frankly. I don't think it's a bad case, but one of the things that Trump is doing is trying to deport, if I win his case, they would try and just send him to a different country. So even if I win, if he's in jail 9 months, and I win his case, instead of letting him go out and go home to his house in New Jersey, they try and ship him to Panama or Guatemala or Mexico, which, yay, it's not Honduras. That's good, but also not with your wife and your 3 kids.
So, Jason, one of the points that you wanted to discuss today with me is the general policy shifts from Biden to the Trump administration. So, I mean, I think you've touched upon it, but what distinguishes what was happening prior to January 21st and now in terms of, let's say, you're the example of the person that's currently in detention or person who has asylum?
Biden was not perfect, and I mean that very sincerely. I think we can talk about other things that I do like him very much for, but immigration, he was always very, I don't say wishy-washy, but he was good on some things and very bad on others. That being said, the Trump administration, as before, as the first time, is extremely draconian in how they approach things. And these are actual people. Like, they're human beings with kids and spouses and jobs and parents and people that they love that are here and that aren't here that they take care of. And refusing to recognize the humanity in them, I do think, is a great disservice to them, but also, frankly, to us as a country. Like, this is a nation of immigrants. Just pretending that people are not people does not help anyone, and it debases us as a people. Like, they are people.
But, Jason, we're talking about 2025, where the American population, the voting population, gave Trump a majority, over 50% of the vote. And he campaigned on getting rid of or removing illegal immigrants. That's what he said,
yep.
Illegal.
Yep.
And why should not the will of the general voting population, majority of the voting population, prevail? Why should these people not be removed from this country? And, you know,
I'll give you a 3-pronged answer there. One, practically speaking, I can't imagine, you can do the math on how many planes it would take to send 10 million people away. It's a big number. I don't know if we could afford that if we wanted to, frankly. Two, so practically it's impossible. Two, it is mostly unconstitutional for some of the things he's doing. The birthright citizenship executive order got struck down, I think it was 2 days. Frankly, I was surprised it was that long. There's been a bunch of others that are immigration related that also got struck down essentially immediately. But the real issue with it in terms of why it should, well, the people arguments always end up in a question ultimately of what's legal and what's not legal. And immigration, especially because it's administration after administration, is always a mishmash of things that don't make sense together. And it is legal to apply for a benefit from USCIS, which is the nice arm of immigration. You can think of it that way, for the most part.
Say it again.
USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. That's, for the most part, you can think of that as like the nice part of immigration. It's the part you ask for. It's the part you ask for status. You can think of it that way. And then ICE is the enforcement arm. Part of the issue that we had last time, and that we will have again, is that you can apply for a benefit legally because you qualify for asylum or you qualify for your residency because you're married to a citizen or whatever. And then now ICE is also, and they've already done this a couple of times, coming in and be like, oh, you're here illegally still, let's pick you up. Even though what you're doing is perfectly lawful, they'll still try and pick you up, and can, frankly, because the law permits it, because we wrote the law. Dumb. Today, this morning, I had a citizenship interview in Cranberry.
Citizenship interview.
Citizenship interview for a guy who's an old client of mine who I got his green card back in 2015 or so.
And that's before a immigration?
Not an officer, not a judge, not a judge, but an officer. And you have to go through the civics questions. And they're not super hard if it's your first language and you can remember them, but it's 100 questions, and he didn't go to school here. He's 50, in his 50s. And one of the questions that she asked him was, what does the Supreme Court do? And he looked at her for a second, he's like, I don't know if they do anything. And I almost said, you might be right in a month or two, but for right now, I don't really know what the answer is. But you know, they're all laws for a reason. We have to respect them, or else this all is meaningless, sincerely, as a profession, as lawyers.
So, Jason, I think what you're saying is, amongst the confusion is the overlap of one administration after another imposing different rules and regulations. So that's why I guess everybody is confused. But having said that, if I am a person who came across the border, for whatever reason, did not seek asylum, and I'm here in this country,
yeah,
what rights, if any, do I have, or should I have any rights, and what are the risks that I run? And I think so that we could educate the people who maybe who are listening to this show, whether it's translated into another language or not, what risks are these folks running, and how can they survive in this environment? What do you recommend?
Everyone in the United States is protected by the Constitution. That is how we wrote it. That is how it's been interpreted. That is how the Constitution works right now. We'll see about that in a couple months, frankly. For most people, if ICE stops you on the street, you don't have to talk to them. Like, you don't have to talk to them at all if you don't want to. You can. My general advice to people is people, frankly, aren't very good at not talking when confronted with law enforcement. If you're going to talk to them, tell the truth. Don't lie. If they come to your house, you don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant. In 20 years of practice, I have never seen ICE have an actual warrant in a case of mine, issued by a judge. They have warrants issued by themselves, that literally their boss will write a warrant saying, I want to go I give you permission to go arrest you at my house. But it's literally written by the ICE officer to his superior, to his inferior, to go and pick up someone. That warrant is not a warrant that is recognized by any government court, or it's not an actual warrant, it's just a piece of paper that someone writes up, don't open the door. And I tell clients all the time, do not open the door. They'll say to open the door, don't open the door. If they actually have a warrant by a judge, they'll break down the door. It'll be the first door in 20 years that I've had someone actually have broken down. Never seen it happen.
Okay, so are these folks on the street just waiting to be tapped on the shoulder by someone? And is that from ICE or from some enforcement agency? And what about the deputization of local police and local other?
Deputization we can get into. That I don't think will be as much of an issue in New Jersey. Governor Murphy has said that he doesn't want to do that. I very much appreciate that. My experience with law enforcement is, frankly, they have enough rules to remember on their own. Immigration law is actually very complex, and it often does have very different rules than state regulations and varies by state. So pretending like you can have everyone learn it doesn't really make sense. That's why we have separate ICE enforcement officers. That makes sense. For most people, ICE will either go and look for you specifically, but I had a client today who I talked to. She was upset when I called her because her brother lives in Pennsylvania, and ICE went to his house because his cousin lives there with him, and the cousin had an arrest warrant out on him, and ICE came, picked him up, and then also saw the brother and arrested him as well. And so she was explaining this to me, and I'm like, okay, well, I need his A number, I need to get his alien registration number, I need some info to try and find the brother and figure out where these people are. But
he was collateral, I guess, damage in this
just collateral,
case.
but just living his life in his house, and they came to his house.
And this individual was here, is it unlawfully or undocumented? Is that the question? Or was he?
That's not a legal status. It's not a legal status. There's no way. Like you can have a deportation order, and then a deportation order, and then they can a removal order, and then they can actually remove you on that. But many people just haven't been caught, or are waiting for their court date, or have been given a work permit while they wait for their court date to come in the mail. All those people are here somewhat in the ether without an actual status because we never actually defined it when we made the laws. It doesn't make sense.
So other than the fact that we're, you and I know are native born, we talked about that, but let's distinguish yourself from your father and tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you became, or you became an American citizen, and why shouldn't what have happened to your family happen to people that are here? Or is that all politics?
It's all together. I was the first one in my family born here. My parents came as children from Cuba with all of my grandparents. They all came at different times in the 60s.
From Cuba?
From Cuba. Mm-hmm. From Cuba. I'm Cuban. I speak Spanish fluently. And essentially what happens is you can see, which I've always been fascinated by, me being Cuban and my parents being Cuban essentially meant, I was born here, but my parents being Cuban essentially meant that they came in the country, open arms, here's your work card, and at a year you can apply for your green card. And they give you residency, and then my parents became citizens, I believe, when I was in the process of, when I was in my mother's womb. But that's all luck. I didn't earn that. That doesn't think I did something for. I was just happened to be born here. I've always appreciated the global politics that plays out in a family's story that makes no sense otherwise. Like my entire family was trying to flee communist Cuba in the 60s. It made sense to go to the nearest neighbor up north and come here. That wasn't something I got to choose. It wasn't something that they even got to choose, frankly. It was just the place you went when you had to leave because things were bad. But you can see that in most of my clients' families, like what happens when and why they're going there. The consul from last night who was fleeing the gang violence, frankly, that's because we allowed Honduras to sink into becoming a narco state. So it's controlled by gangs. Like literally, we put their president in jail. Their ex-president is in jail now because he's a gang member. That's why he suffered that, because we let that happen through a couple different things. We can get into globalization.
Well, okay, Jason, I know we have to wrap up in a minute or two, but if at this point in time you have, as I said before, the majority of voters felt that Trump's policy toward immigration was the correct policy. And you have perhaps as many as 10 million people who don't have certain documentation they need to be here. How do we dispel the notion, in your opinion, as an immigration lawyer, that these people pose a danger to the United States, economically or otherwise?
Studies have shown that the immigrant population is by far a safer population than most of the native-born population. They commit crimes at a much lower rate. A lot of them, until they get work cards, pay taxes into the system that they will never get back, and help our economy that way.
Because of Social Security. If
you don't have a Social Security card,
Okay.
you pay taxes in, you also don't get any back eventually. And C, it's hypocritical. Trump is married to an immigrant from Slovenia. His, I think, great-grandfather was from Scotland. Like everyone, for the most part in this nation, is descended from immigrants, and you can go back a couple generations or a couple more generations, but it's all there. And pretending like that's not who we are is refusing to look in your own mirror and pretending like what's there isn't there.
In 30 seconds, is there a policy or procedure that you see that can remedy the situation as we have it right now? Rather than demonization, is there a way for integration in our society in a healthy way?
Kindness would be the easiest answer.
All right. So, well, thank you so much for providing us with some background. And I think the next time we talk, we're going to have to maybe get into some more of the legalese that's involved in it. But there doesn't seem to be a real definition that we could, because it seems like a muddle.
How people talk about it and how it actually is defined and processed are completely different. And I'll have to translate things from my staff that they see on the news, because what are they talking about here? And I'm like, they're talking about this. Okay. But it makes no sense. And it's not meant to make that, it's not meant to make sense.
Okay. We have to end it right here, Jason. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very informative show.